Hi everyone! In this video I'm going to be showing you how to wedge clay. The reason that people wedge clay in ceramics is to get even clay consistency and to take out any air bubbles that are inside the clay. So you kind of saw me just mashing my clay up. I didn't wedge it. I want to cut through it and show you guys what the inside might look if you don't wedge your clay. So right away you can see that little empty spot. That is called an air bubble or an air pocket. I open it up and you can see it's way bigger than it looked originally. But the reason you would not want to have an air pocket in your clay is because when you fire it, the air wants to find a way to escape. It's inside of there and it needs to find a way to escape with all the heat. So it will make its own way. It's going to carve its own path right through the wall of your piece. Your piece is going to explode in the kiln. I know explode sounds kind of intense. It's more of just like a pop and then your piece is completely broken. But regardless, your piece is completely broken. Wedging is a step that you don't want to miss. You're probably going to start this wedging process off with some clay scraps. I always like to spray down the clay scraps that I have and wrap them in a wet paper towel to make sure they're nice and rehydrated and ready to go for wedging. If you weren't to do this step and your clay was on the drier side, wedging would be very hard. Your clay would probably crack a lot. So taking this extra step really makes sure that your clay is prepared and ready to go for wedging. You can see here, once I've wrapped it, I like to go back in and spray it again to just really make sure that the moisture is settling inside the clay. One more thing before we get started. I wanted to show you guys, I have those tiny bits of bone dry scraps. You can actually reuse those. So all the clay you have, you don't want to throw away. You can save whatever. You can see that I'm taking those little scraps and shards and dust of clay. I'm putting it into my slip bowl. I'm adding water. And now I'm going to mix it back in to repurpose that bone dry clay into slip. So I'm just mushing all my scraps together, and then I want to wipe down my surface, make sure it's nice and dry and ready to go. You want to make sure your clay can fit in your hands. You don't want too big or too small of a piece. Something that isn't gonna like fully fit would work perfectly. But as you see, I kind of just push down towards the clay. I'm kind of pushing at a diagonal away from myself. I roll the clay back up to myself and then I push away. Roll back up, push away. Okay, so that is kind of the movement that you're going to be making. So again, from a different angle, you see that diagonal. I am going to push down on the clay. It's kind of a blunt push. You don't want to really drag it. You're going to roll it up to that tip and push down again. A lot of people get confused with wedging in the way that they're supposed to rotate it. The best way to think about it is that you're making a big circle. So you're pushing away from yourself, you're rolling it back up, and you're pushing it back down to complete that circle. In fact, you can actually see the spiral forming on the side because you're spiraling the clay, you're pushing it on itself, you're making those layers. When you're wedging out your clay, I want to show you the shape that your clay should take. So right here, you can see this. I think it looks like a praying mantis. Some people say that it's a bowl shape, but that is the shape you're kind of looking for or going for. Now, the amount of times you're going to wedge your clay out is going to vary depending on the size, the clay consistency, or the air bubbles that may be in it. But a good range is anywhere from 20 to 100 times. And I want to count out the wedges with you real quick. So 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. For a piece of clay that size, I would say anywhere between 30 to 40 times is an okay amount. But when in doubt, you want to wedge more than less. One thing I like to do when I'm wedging out my clay is alternate the sides that I start on. So right here you can see I'm horizontal and then I'm going to rotate it to a vertical position there, and then I continue to wedge. By doing that, I'm really making sure the clay consistency is as even as possible. The last thing I want to show you guys is how to stop wedging and finish up your clay. So when I want to stop wedging, I stop adding as much pressure. I kind of release the amount of pressure. I start going lighter on that push away, and I let it fold over onto itself. So now I kind of have a burrito. I like to think of it as a burrito. And then you are going to start patting it on these sides. I like to pat it more into a cylinder first to avoid any air bubbles from forming on those creases that we made while wedging. And you can see I'm kind of approaching it from the side and then going down to the ends. And then once I felt good on that end, I patted it in. But you see all those creases. I'm kind of going at that bottom corner at an angle and trying to get rid of them by patting them. And then once I feel good, I just do a big old pat on the side. And that is pretty much it. From there, you can pat it into a sphere and make whatever you want to make. Now, if this is your first couple of times or first time wedging clay, you want to check if you did it right. So you want to grab a wire tool or a fishing line and cut through the clay ball that you wedged and see if you have any air pockets. Okay, so we saw those air pockets in the beginning. We know what they look like. I cut through the piece multiple times to check, but you do want to make sure that there's no air pockets anywhere. One problem you may run into or encounter while wedging is if your clay is too wet, your table surface is too wet, and your clay rips off onto the table. If this happens, it's no big deal. You could scrape it off with a rib or kidney, but it is something you want to keep in mind. If your clay is just sticking all over the table, it's probably a little too wet. One common mistake that I see students make pretty often is the amount of pressure that they apply. So right here I show you guys. Kids actually do that sometimes in class. You don't want to be doing that. You don't want to smudge your clay against the table. It's going to stick to it and not work out. This is how you should be wedging your clay. A majority of the clay should be in your hands. Your hand should be completely surrounding the clay. The only part of clay that's not getting in there was that bottom piece. So right there, you see me doing it. Watch my fingers. They are not wrapped around the clay at all. You want your hands to be really wrapped around that clay. You're in control of the clay. And then one cool thing here, you get to see an air bubble right there getting popped. This is why we wedge, right? One more thing, guys, I just want to show you. You do not want the clay to bunch up at the bottom like right here. Okay, majority of the clay, again, should be in your hands. There shouldn't be that much at the bottom. The only other problem I foresee happening is if your clay is a little too dry, it will be very cracked and hard to wedge. Sorry, I forgot to take a video of it, but you'll know right away, and the solution is just to add water and rehydrate your clay. So now that you guys are super prepared, we're gonna watch it all come together. You're pushing down at an angle, a diagonal, away from yourself, kind of blunt. You roll it up to the tip, push down again. So it's that never-ending circle, right? You roll it back up, push down, roll it back up, etc. Now we're gonna watch me wedge out clay in real time. So this is the speed that I go. I'm probably gonna be going faster than you can. It will take a couple of months to get used to the muscles needed and the movement, but you will get there. Well, that's all I have for you guys, so I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you for watching, and happy wedging.